I fell in love with the Sufjan Stevens song several years ago at Easter. I even got everyone at church to learn a choreographed dance and sing the song in one of our services. But that was several years ago, and we were still doing all kinds of crazy things in worship. Like meeting together in person. But there's just something about the childlike, simple melody that's so joyful and catchy and just perfect for spring and Easter time, a feeling of waking up, blinking your eyes, and adjusting to reality. But whatever the music prompts, the lyrics are a soulful examination demanding a response. And in my imagination, it's a response to the resurrection. Will you join the sound? But first, maybe there's a more subtle question. Can you hear it?
And will I be a part of what you've made?
So many great questions. What will things look like this time next year? Will I be in the same place, or will I have the courage to go deeper, stay truer, give all of myself to you? Will I be able to let go of my doubt and fear that keeps me from really acknowledging God's hand in my life? But then there's this deeper question, a challenge to himself, a response to the resurrection. He asks, will I be part of what you've made? Not just will I decide to accept what you've said and mentally assent to belief in your tenets. Rather, he questions, will I be invited to the sound? This immediately reminds me of the gospel stories where Jesus starts appearing to the disciples for the first time after the resurrection. And at first, people don't believe it, especially if they're hearing it secondhand. Like the great story where Thomas is like, look, I got all swept up in this stuff before. I believed, I followed, and then it turned out to be nothing like what I expected. I had faith, but now if I can't see it, if I can't feel it, forget it. So Jesus lets him see and touch, and he gets it. Just like they all got it in a way they didn't before the resurrection. Jesus isn't talking about overthrowing the government or changing religious leadership. He isn't talking about getting everyone on the same page with the right doctrine. It's about believing so that you may have life in his name. Full and real, abundant life that comes from living in concert with God and then sharing that blessing of life with others. It's like jumping in a river. That river of living water Jesus says he offers. And I imagine in light of the song that it's a river of sound. And we're invited to jump in, to join the sound. So one day I was walking along the parkway, kind of absorbed in the early spring beauty of everything, the trees budding, birds singing. And I realized as I walked and took all of this in that I felt more aware of God and somehow less aware of myself. And I started thinking about how the Bible says that the trees and rocks will cry out and worship God, even if we don't. And I started contemplating the idea that their sole reason for existence is to glorify God, and that in their glorification, they remind me to do the same. And I started thinking about that being my purpose too, and how I need others in my life who remind me of God and help me see God in the world. And then it became really challenging as I started to think that that must be my purpose too, and that I actually have a responsibility to you and to everyone I meet to join in this clapping and praising of trees and rocks, just like the song, to join in the sound. love the way the second chorus goes from a solo voice and banjo to a chorus of da-da-da, da-da, da-da-da, da, da-da-da. And I imagine they're the trees and the hills singing. And for the first time, the singer notices this chorus of the natural world making a band, a parade, worshiping God with their very being. They have no doubt, no questioning, no time when worship starts or ends. It's why they were created. Their very existence is a testimony to God's glory. There is no ambivalence. Simply to exist is to worship God. And the singer is wooed by this way of being, by the desire to let go of his own doubt and fear and surrender every part to God. The joy of the simple chorus singing behind him builds, and then, after the words of the song are over, the singer's voice faintly joins in the chorus. He joins the sound. I think this simple song is deceptively brilliant. Hidden in the childlike melody and simple lyrics is a profound call to Christians to worship God with our whole being. Maybe there's a lesson and some freedom here for us in our current situation. The fact that we designate only a particular time on Sunday as worship indicates that we're not always aware of what that word means or what God requires of us. Worshiping God is giving adoration, reverence, devotion. The scriptures indicate that rocks and trees do this by existing, and that we are commanded to do it too, not just once a week when we sing, but with every breath we take. We Christians believe that God is worthy of worship. But I wonder how many of us are secretly uncomfortable with this idea that it is our sole reason for existence. I often find myself preferring to believe that God exists in order to help me with my life, to make it easier or make me feel better. God exists because I need someone to call on in times of need. Yet if this is the case, the atheists are right. That kind of faith is a fantasy of sorts. In that faith, I'm fashioning a God to fill my needs, rather than worshiping a God who fashioned me. Instead, this Easter, let's think of worship as joining the sound, adding our voices to the chorus of song already sung by every form of life that's in perfect harmony with God. Like the trees and the rocks and the birds who worship God simply by being, just as intended, we can surrender our being to worship of God. Let's try to imagine what our lives might be like if we were fully as God intended and embrace an idea of whole life worship, learning to see our everyday common world through the lens of the transcendent, submitting ourselves to making every act an act of worship, to be fully immersed in God's glory, to respond to the gift and miracle of the resurrection by joining in the sound.
If I am alive this time next year, will I have arrived trees of grace.